At this point in our timeline, winter has set in, and we are taking advantage of the relatively warm bedrooms to keep progressing on this earth-sheltered house. The mission is to prep for pouring concrete floors with integrated radiant heat. We start with leveling the sand on the floors. Chunks of concrete are hard to level, so we trade them for the nice clean sand in the hole and just bury the chunks. The clean sand levels more easily. Then we lay down a vapor barrier, and then add insulation and tape it all down. Lots of oddities to explain here. I'll do it pop-up video style. Why is there some vapor barrier above the insulation? That's just fold over from underneath. I figured it couldn't hurt just to leave it there if I had no other room that needed a scrap of that size. If the EPS ever got stomped on and broke, it would keep those pieces contained so they wouldn't float up through the concrete. I'm really just worried about the concrete guys stomping around. Here I'm putting up a board to mount the PEX manifolds on. It's much easier than attaching everything to the concrete directly. When we were working in here, there were a lot of references to this as the igloo. 4 inches of insulation for the closer half of this room, simply because we didn't have enough dirt in there and the ground was frozen outside, so we couldn't get more. I decided to fill the space with extra insulation instead of extra concrete. We are mixing use of white EPS and pink XPS simply because I got a great Thanksgiving Day sale on the white stuff, so it cost a tiny fraction of what the pink costs, but I couldn't get enough for the whole job. Both are rated to support the concrete load, but the pink is unquestionably more robust to have the crew stomping on, so I used the pink wherever I thought the concrete guys would walk. What's that around the edges? Along all the walls, I started with a beveled piece of insulation that can keep the floor thermally separated from the walls. It also allows for some thermal expansion of the floor without too much force on the walls. Next room. After laser leveling the sand, we add vapor barrier and then insulation. The blue tubes in the middle of the room are ENT conduit for running electrical wires to a closet in the middle of that space. I had designed the PEX layout on a computer just to make sure that I had almost exactly 300 feet per run. But the first physical step is simply marking out the path on the ground with a Sharpie. Then we roll out the coil according to the marks. Here my boys are taking turns as the coil wrangler. I'm positioning the coil along my marks, and my father is stapling things down with a PEX stapler. This pushes 2-inch long plastic staples into the foam to hold the PEX. Once the loop gets all the way back to the manifold, I connect the second end of the tube to the return side of the manifold. Meanwhile, my sister had been working on leveling the next room over. Now we add the vapor barrier. This is just 6mm plastic sheeting. Its job is to prevent moisture from the earth from passing up into the concrete floors. It also traps radon below the plastic. Again, you can see that I use that pink extruded polystyrene in the high traffic hallway. I didn't run any tube under where closets and things like that would be located. The back half of this room is also pink, but I used 1-inch boards there as an experiment and because the plumbing was too shallow. I did try both the shorter staples and the 2-inch ones that I'd used elsewhere, and I found that either way it didn't hold nearly as well, just less polystyrene to hold on to. Here I'm prepping an insulated chute to pass the PEX tubes on this side of the house down to the basement manifolds. Here's how it looked in the end. It's just a smooth little transition for the PEX to pass out through that hole and up into this floor. The mechanical room is below that circular floor section. Downstairs in the mechanical room, I needed to reorganize these tubes and manifolds. They had to be placed in this room before we had a roof, etc., so I mounted them directly to the concrete. But now it's time to put up a wood board so that it's easier to mount the pumps and the valves, etc. later. The board is just a full 4x8 sheet of plywood painted white. Now I can remount the PEX manifolds. The lower one clearly goes down into the basement floor. You can see that's where all the tubes go. The higher one is for the quad deck floor above the basement. And here I'm making room to add an additional manifold for the new PEX that we're going to be putting down. Then I tidy up the PEX on the board and reattach the manifold. I also mount and reset up the on-demand hot water heater. Later we'll actually end up connecting this hot water heater to the manifolds. None of that's in yet. Back upstairs and we're leveling the living room floor. If you saw the video of shooting the gunite for the roof, you have some appreciation for how much work it was to clean the concrete mess off this floor in order to even get to this point. Then we laid down the vapor barrier and trimmed to fit. Why the switch to the black vapor barrier? I got some very cheap and the only difference is the color. Generally, I prefer the transparent plastic, but here we decided to save the transparent rolls that we have for the windows and other places where black just couldn't be used. Back in the mechanical room, and I can mount the new manifold for the new tubes. Okay, let's take a moment and explain this radiant floor stuff a bit. Basically, that EcoSmart instant boiler that you saw earlier will heat up the water and then pass it through the pump to the manifolds. The manifolds distribute the flow to all the different PEX loops. Then it goes out and into the floor of the house and comes back into the return manifold and back through the instant boiler, around and around and around. The thermostat's job is simply to turn on the pump to get things flowing. For those who want more specific details, this can use the fan signal wire or the heat signal wire. There's fun reasons for each of those. You could also control valves for each PEX pipe, but the main thing is that it does not turn on the boiler. It doesn't have to add heat for this to be an effective system. If I install multiple zones, I can set it up so that each thermostat can turn on its own zone pump and/or valve from the manifold. That'll be a separate video when I get to setting up all that fun stuff. The pump, or pumps, move water through the PEX pipes and the heat is exchanged with the concrete. Heat can go into the concrete or come from the concrete. As the water passes back through the mini boiler, a flow meter turns it on, and the temperature of the water is increased from whatever it comes in at to the specified temperature that's supposed to go back out again. The key thing here is that if the water is already warm, less additional energy needs to be added. Also, as the water travels around and around through all the loops, it spreads the heat around to give a mostly even heat distribution. Only a little heat is transferred to the warm areas because they have a lower delta, and more is transferred to the cool areas because there's a higher delta driving the heat transfer. So instead of red and blue, I'm just going to color all of these orange because that's the steady state. You can see here that I just drew 3 loops for simplicity. The real house has 16. And this is just a schematic view, but you can imagine the flow leaving the supply manifold, traveling around, and back in through the return and back in through the heater to get any additional heat that it needs to keep the thermostat happy. In my case, some of these tubes pass through some passive solar heat zones where sunlight comes in and heats the floor directly. In these zones, heat from the floor would be transferred to the water. This prevents those sunny rooms from overheating, and it helps transfer that free heat to the other rooms in the back. Ideally, when that solar heated water reaches the boiler, it'll be at a temperature where little or no heat needs to be added before simply sending it around through the other loops to distribute it through the house. In terms of controlling this all, we can program the thermostat to turn on the fan if the room gets too hot. Of course, when the thermostat thinks it's turning on a fan, it really just turns on the pump, which moves the water from the rest of the house through that overheating room to collect the heat and take it away. As you saw earlier, my particular design uses 2 sets of manifolds, each with their own EcoSmart boiler. One is in the bedrooms, and the other one's in that basement mechanical room. I wanted both to be able to take advantage of the passive solar energy in the living room, so I tweaked the configuration a bit so that loops from both sides could share that sunny space and all that free energy. In the next scene, you'll see this odd PEX layout on the living room floor. These tubes coming in are from the bedroom manifold. In addition to the sun space, they also pass under that wood stove area to collect and distribute some of that heat. And then back to the manifold. Here they're leveling the kitchen and dining room. There was a little bit too much sand in this area, so we had to take out a lot. Back to the living room side, and we are adding the PEX from the west manifold. And then back down into the mechanical room. Those last little wiggles are to use up tubes so that we get to the 300 feet. placing some rebar over the PEX tubes. You'll see later we use proper rebar chairs and everything so they don't touch. Then we accidentally set the time-lapse camera to video mode. I was going to delete it all, but I'll show you just a couple real-time scenes. Sorry there isn't any audio, so I'll have to make up the dialogue. The bedrooms are relatively warm, but this area, especially by the door here, is exposed to the cold, and the moisture in the ground has frozen it. So we can't just rake it level, we needed to chip out the frozen dirt. It's pretty unpleasant work. You can imagine this clip going on for hours. So when you get a chance for a laser level check break, you take it. Here I'm using the laser level and stick method. The laser level is usually sitting underneath the camera tripod so no one bumps it, but it also means you never see it in the videos. But you can see the stick. We've marked the stick at the right height so that you can just place the end on the floor and check if the mark is above or below where the laser says it should be. Then we just move dirt around or remove dirt to adjust. We need to take this whole area down another inch or two. Fortunately, only the top inch was frozen. Skipping ahead, and my poor mother is working on the frozen dirt while presumably the rest of us are having hot chocolate in the hot tub. I bring her another wheelbarrow to fill, and then she hears a funny sound. Oops. She'd hit one of those blue ENT conduit pipes that was running through this area to the office. Obviously, she lost her pickaxe privileges and had to switch back to the masonry hammer, while I went to finish my hot chocolate. Seriously though, we had already run the wires, and she just barely cracked the blue tube, so no actual damage done. I just got some really good tape to seal it up against any water or dirt that might get in there in the future. These two had done a lot of hard work that day, and now they wanted a nice picture of themselves, just standing there while I used the pick. The camera actually has a little red light that flashes for each time-lapse frame, so here they're just waiting for it. But nope. Nothing. Hey Simon, something's wrong with the camera. Oh, video mode. So we switched that back to time-lapse and the work continues. A while later they did remember to try and pose for another picture. Eventually we did get it level and at the right depth. Then we can add the vapor barrier, etc. Those blue ENT tubes sticking up will be under the kitchen island. Lots of large-scale puzzling to fit the rectangles in this curvy space, but at least the room was large enough for a few untrimmed pieces. Some earth-sheltering purists might ask, why use insulation at all? While it is true that I want to have direct thermal contact with the earth so it can help moderate the temperature in this space, I do already have plenty of uninsulated wall and ceiling space for that contact. Having insulation on the floor just makes it all much easier to protect the vapor barrier and place the PEX tubes and rebar, etc. In fact, building code requires at least R5 under the radiant tubes, but the code also includes an exemption for alternative insulation schemes like my insulation umbrella. Any insulation scraps not used elsewhere are saved, and later we shredded them and made them into EPS concrete. That's lightweight insulating concrete. You'll see that in a later video. Now I'm marking the layout for the last couple PEX zones. Again, I didn't put PEX under where the kitchen cabinets or appliances will go. That brief pause was for a stapler jam. Putting the whole crew in my office at once was a bit of a squeeze. And here are some pics of the final status. I think it looks cool. You can also see the rebar chairs and all that sort of stuff. And of course, before the final inspection, we had to pressure test the new tubes. We left these full of pressure for the duration of the concrete pour. Actually, they're still pressurized now. The concrete pour will be the next video. If you want to see that when it comes out, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.